The city is still. It is the kind of still that comes after something irreversible has happened, after a verdict has been read, after a door has closed for the last time, after a funeral. Jerusalem in the spring of what we now call AD 33 is a city that has just executed a man and gone back to work. The markets are open. The temple priests are performing their daily rituals. Roman soldiers are eating their midday meal in the shade of Antonia Fortress. If you walked through the city that afternoon, you would not know that anything had changed. But 11 men know. They are in an upper room, the same room, according to early tradition, where they ate their last meal together with the man they followed. The room is in the southwestern quarter of the city, probably in the house of a wealthy supporter. The walls are thick. The door is locked. And these 11 men are sitting with the strangest combination of emotions a human being can carry: grief and wonder, and something that has no name yet. Because they have seen something that cannot be unseen. They watched a man die on a Friday. They buried him. And on a Sunday morning, before the sun was fully up, the women came back from the tomb with a story so impossible that most of the men dismissed it as hysteria, until he was standing in the room with them. Wounds still visible, voice still the same. And now, 40 days later, they have just watched him rise into the sky until a cloud received him from their sight. 2 men in white appeared and told them he would come back the same way. And then the 2 men were gone. And 11 fishermen, tax collectors, and political radicals are standing on a hillside outside Jerusalem with nowhere to go and a commission ringing in their ears. Go to every nation, make disciples, baptize them, teach them, and I am with you always, to the end of the age. That was it. No strategy, no army, no funds, no political allies, no infrastructure, just 11 men and a promise. Here's what I want you to sit with for a moment. These 11 men were not powerful. They were not educated in the Roman sense. No Greek rhetoric training, no senatorial connections, no letters of introduction to the courts of kings. They were provincials from a backwater region of a conquered nation. The most politically connected man among them had been a tax collector for the Roman occupation, which made him despised by his own people and irrelevant to his employers. And yet, within 3 decades, this movement would reach Rome itself. Within 60 years, it would have communities in Syria, Egypt, Greece, Asia Minor, and, as you will see before this video ends, as far east as the Indian subcontinent. Within 300 years, it would be the official religion of the empire that tried to kill it. This is not a story about religion. This is not a story about doctrine. This is not a story about 12 good men who believed the right things and got rewarded for it. This is a story about 11 ordinary people who saw something, and then spent the rest of their lives, in chains and in exile and on crosses, refusing to say they hadn't. One of them will reach India. He will walk further than any Roman soldier ever marched on campaign. He will found churches in a land where no one has ever heard the name of Jesus, in a language he does not speak, among people who have never heard of Jerusalem. And those churches will still exist when you and I are long dead. We will get to him, but not yet. Let's start with the first one to die. His name was James. Not James, the brother of Jesus. That is a different James. This James was the son of a fisherman named Zebedee, from the fishing village of Bethsaida on the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee. He had a brother named John. They were working the nets with their father the morning Jesus walked by and said 2 words, "Follow me." They left the nets. They left the boat. They left their father standing in it. James was part of the innermost circle. The 3 disciples who were present when Jesus was transfigured on the mountaintop, his face shining like the sun, his clothes becoming white as light. James was in the Garden of Gethsemane, close enough to hear Jesus praying in the dark. He was one of the last people with him before the arrest. He was also, in the book of Acts, the first one to die. The year was approximately AD 44. Herod Agrippa I, grandson of Herod the Great, the king who slaughtered the infants in Bethlehem, was then ruling Judea under Roman authority. Herod Agrippa needed to maintain his political standing with the Jewish religious establishment in Jerusalem, and the followers of Jesus had become a public problem. They were preaching openly in the temple courts. They were causing crowds. They were claiming that a man Herod's grandfather had tried to kill had risen from the dead. Herod Agrippa made a decision. He had James arrested. And then, with almost no fanfare, in a single verse of the book of Acts, he had him executed by sword. It is the briefest recorded martyrdom in the New Testament. Luke gives it 1 sentence, James, son of Zebedee, killed with the sword. No speech. No miraculous escape. No angel appearing to open prison doors the way one opened for Peter just verses later. Just a sword. And James was gone. Here's what most people miss. There is a story preserved by Eusebius of Caesarea, a church historian writing in the early 4th century, drawing on even earlier sources, about what happened at the execution of James. A man had been involved in the arrest. He had been assigned to escort James to the place of execution. He was, by any reasonable definition, James's enemy. But as he walked alongside James, watching the way he moved, listening to the words James spoke on the way to his own death, something broke open in him. By the time they reached the place of execution, the man had made a decision. He threw himself at James's feet and confessed that he too believed in Jesus. He asked to be executed alongside him. The executioner paused. James looked at the man for a moment. Then he reached out and kissed him on the cheek and said, "Peace be with you." They were both killed together. Eusebius records this as a matter of history. Whether you take it as literal fact or as a preserved tradition of the early community, something real is being communicated. These men died in a way that the people watching them could not account for. Now, Peter. If James is the first to die, Peter is the one whose death Jesus predicted before it happened. You probably know the story of Peter's denial. On the night of Jesus' arrest, Peter followed at a distance to the high priest's courtyard. 3 times, bystanders identified him as a follower of Jesus. 3 times, Peter denied it. The 3rd time, a rooster crowed, and Peter went out and wept bitterly. That is the Peter most people know, the one who failed. Here's the Peter most people don't know. After the resurrection, Jesus had a private conversation with Peter on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, the same sea where they had first met. 3 times, Jesus asked him, "Do you love me?" 3 times, Peter said yes. 3 questions for 3 denials. A 3-fold restoration for a 3-fold failure. And then Jesus said something unusual. He said, "When you were young, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go." John's Gospel tells us plainly what this meant. Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Stretched out hands. That is the posture of crucifixion. Peter had roughly 30 years after that conversation before the prediction came true. He preached in Jerusalem, in Antioch, across Asia Minor and into Rome, where, under the Emperor Nero's persecution of Christians following the Great Fire of Rome in AD 64, he was arrested. The early church historian Origen, drawing on traditions that were already old in his time, tells us that Peter was condemned to crucifixion. But Peter made a request of his executioners. He asked to be crucified upside down. He said he was not worthy to die in the same manner as his Lord. They obliged him. There is something about that request, the specific, deliberate, costly humility of it. That is either the act of a man who genuinely believed everything he had preached, or one of the most elaborate and pointless gestures in the history of human performance. And if it was performance, you have to ask, for whom? Nero was not going to be impressed. The crowd was not going to spare him. There was no audience to play to except the God he had spent 30 years talking about. He died upside down on a cross in Rome, asking only to be positioned below the place where his teacher had died. We are 2 men in, and here's the pattern already taking shape. These were not men who died accidentally. They were not caught in the crossfire of a political conflict they didn't understand. They knew what they were walking into. James watched the movement being persecuted before his arrest. Peter knew what crucifixion looked like. He had watched it happen to Jesus. And they went anyway. If this video is giving you something, if you're finding yourself leaning in, consider subscribing. This channel exists to go deep into the stories the Sunday sermon doesn't have time for. Hit the button, and I'll see you in the next one. Now, let's talk about the ones who went to the ends of the earth. The Greek word for apostle is apostolos. It comes from the verb meaning to send away, to dispatch, to commission for a mission. An apostle is not a teacher who stays in one place and builds a school. An apostle is a person sent out, and sent out is exactly what they were. After the events of Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit came on the gathered disciples like a rush of wind and tongues of fire, and Peter preached to a crowd of thousands in the street, the movement in Jerusalem grew fast, and then the persecution that followed the stoning of Stephen scattered them. Acts chapter 8 tells us that everyone except the apostles left Jerusalem and spread through Judea and Samaria. The apostles stayed, but not for long. There is a concept in Jewish law that sits behind the apostles' mission, shaliach. It means an authorized representative, a legal agent whose words and actions carry the authority of the person who commissioned him. When a shaliach speaks, it is as if the sender himself is present. When the disciples were commissioned by Jesus with the words, "As the Father has sent me, so I send you," they were not being appointed as teachers of a new philosophy. They were being made legal witnesses to a specific event. And witnesses have to go where the court is. Andrew was the first disciple Jesus called, before Peter, actually. He was Peter's brother, also from Bethsaida, also a fisherman. According to Eusebius, Andrew preached in Scythia, the vast territory north of the Black Sea, roughly modern-day Ukraine and southern Russia. He also preached in Greece. He died in Patmos, a city on the western coast of Greece, in approximately AD 60. The Roman governor had him arrested for converting his wife and brother to the faith. The sentence was crucifixion. But Andrew's cross was different. He requested an X-shaped cross to avoid dying in the form his Lord had died. The X-cross now bears his name in heraldry, the Cross of St. Andrew. You will find it on the flag of Scotland today. Pay attention to this part. Early accounts say Andrew did not die quickly. He was tied, not nailed, to the cross, a method that prolongs death considerably. He reportedly preached from the cross for 2 days before he died. 2 days. The crowd that gathered listened to a man dying by increments, and he spent those final hours talking about the person he had followed 30 years before. There is something in that detail that stops me every time I encounter it. Philip was the disciple who served as an intermediary between the Greek-speaking world and Jesus. It was Philip who brought the Greek seekers to him, according to the Gospel of John. After the resurrection, Philip preached in Phrygia, the central highland region of what is now Turkey. He settled in a city called Hierapolis, which still exists today as an archaeological site near the modern Turkish city of Pamukkale. He died there, in approximately AD 80, crucified or hanged upside down during a period of local persecution. He was in his 70s. He had been preaching for roughly 50 years. Bartholomew, also called Nathanael in the Gospel of John, is one of the most geographically remarkable of the 12. He is credited by early church tradition with bringing the gospel to Armenia, to northwest India, and possibly Ethiopia. He is the patron saint of the Armenian Apostolic Church, one of the oldest Christian communities in the world, which traces its founding directly to him. He was martyred in Armenia. The accounts are not gentle. He was skinned alive, a form of execution reserved for the most despised enemies of the state, then beheaded. The Armenian Church has kept his memory for nearly 2,000 years. They did not invent a comfortable death for their founding apostle. They kept the real one, Matthew, the tax collector. There is something worth pausing on about Matthew's inclusion in the 12, if you understand the social dynamics of first-century Judea. Tax collectors worked for the Roman occupation. They collected levies from their own people on behalf of the empire that had conquered them. And they were permitted to collect extra for themselves, which most of them did. A devout Jew would not share a meal with a tax collector. They were considered traitors, outcasts, collaborators. Jesus walked past Matthew's tax booth and said, "Follow me." And Matthew got up and followed. His Gospel, the first book of the New Testament, is addressed primarily to a Jewish audience, dense with Old Testament quotations and fulfillment language. Matthew was a man writing to his own people, trying to show them something he had seen with his own eyes. His death is the most disputed among the 12. Some early sources say he died naturally. Others say he was martyred somewhere in Ethiopia or Persia. What is consistent is this: he left. He did not stay in Judea and live a comfortable life. He went. Simon the Zealot and Thaddaeus, also known as Judas son of James, are the two most historically obscure of the 12. The Zealots were a Jewish political movement dedicated to violent resistance against the Roman occupation. That Jesus had both a tax collector and a zealot among his inner circle is one of the quietly extraordinary social details of the Gospel accounts. In any other context, these two men would have been enemies. Both are traditionally associated with a mission to Persia, modern Iran. Both were martyred there, though the exact accounts vary. Simon is variously described as crucified or sawed in half. Thaddaeus is said to have been killed with arrows or an axe. They are the least documented of the 12. Their stories thin out quickly in the historical record. But they were there in the upper room. They are named in every apostolic list. And they went somewhere, and they did not come back. We have covered 9 of the 12. 9 men who scattered to the edges of the known world and, in most cases, did not survive the journey home. 2 remain. And I want you to stay with me for these 2, because they are the ones this story has been building toward. One of them will outlive the Roman Empire, or nearly. He will be the last living eyewitness. He will write the final book of the Bible on an island prison in his 90s, seeing visions so strange that theologians are still arguing about what they mean. The other one will make it to India. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. And if you want to see more of this kind of content, history, scripture, the stories the Sunday sermon doesn't have time for, leave a comment below and tell me which disciple surprised you most so far. 2 more to go. And they are the best 2. John, son of Zebedee, brother of James, the one Jesus called, along with his brother, Boanerges, sons of thunder. The one who, in the gospel that bears his name, never refers to himself by name, only as the disciple whom Jesus loved. The one who stood at the foot of the cross when almost everyone else had run, and to whom Jesus, dying, entrusted the care of his own mother. John is the anomaly of the 12. He is the one who refuses to follow the pattern. Every story we have about the disciples follows the same arc. They went somewhere, they preached, they were arrested, they died. That arc is so consistent across 11 men that it begins to feel like a law of nature. And then there is John, around AD 95, under the Emperor Domitian, a man who demanded to be addressed as Dominus et Deus, Lord and God, and who executed people who refused. A new persecution swept through the Roman provinces. John was by this point an old man, almost certainly in his late 80s, living in Ephesus on the western coast of what is now Turkey. He was the last surviving member of the original 12. Everyone else was gone. The Roman authorities had him brought to Rome. Tertullian, writing in the late 2nd century, records a tradition that John was thrown into boiling oil near the Latin Gate, and survived. Whether you take that as literal history, or as the kind of story a persecuted community tells about its beloved elder, what happened next is not disputed. The Romans couldn't kill him. They exiled him to the island of Patmos in the Aegean Sea, a small, black volcanic rock used as a penal colony for political prisoners. And this is where it gets remarkable. On that island, in that exile, the old man began to see visions. The book of Revelation opens with John telling us exactly where he is and why. I, John, your brother and companion in the suffering and kingdom and patient endurance that are ours in Jesus, was on the island of Patmos because of the word of God and the testimony of Jesus. He was not there by choice. He was there because they put him there. And what he received in that place, whatever you make of the theology and the symbolism, is one of the most remarkable documents in human history. A letter to 7 churches, a vision of heaven and judgment, a promise about the end of everything and the beginning of something that never ends. The Emperor Domitian died in AD 96. John was released. He returned to Ephesus. Irenaeus of Lyon, writing around AD 180, tells us that John lived there until the reign of the Emperor Trajan, which means he survived not just Domitian but the reign that came after. He was well into his 90s when he died. He is the only one of the 12 who died in bed. Not because he was safe, not because no one tried to kill him. He simply outlasted them. Now, Thomas. His name in Greek is Didymos. His name in Aramaic is Toma. Both words mean the same thing, the twin. We do not know whose twin he was. The Gospel of John never tells us. He appears in the text always as Thomas, called the twin. As if the name itself is a question the author decided to leave open. You know him, probably, as Doubting Thomas. The one who wasn't in the room when Jesus appeared to the others after the resurrection. The one who said, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." That is Thomas as most people know him. The skeptic. The holdout. Here is Thomas as history knows him. 8 days after his declaration of doubt, Jesus appeared again. Thomas was in the room. Jesus looked directly at him and said, "Put your finger here and see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas's answer is the highest Christological statement in all 4 Gospels. He did not reach out to touch the wounds. He just looked. And he said, "My Lord and my God." not my teacher, not my rabbi, my Lord and my God. And then Thomas did something no other disciple did. He went east. All the others went to the Mediterranean world, to the Roman provinces, to the Greek-speaking cities, to territories you could reach by Roman road and sea lane. That was the known world. That was the world a first-century Jewish man from Galilee could navigate. Thomas went past it. The early church document known as the Acts of Thomas, combined with the independent living tradition of the church in Kerala, India, placed Thomas on the Malabar coast, the southwestern coast of India, present-day Kerala, by approximately AD 52. He arrived as a passenger on Indian Ocean trading vessels, the same routes that Roman geographers had documented for decades. He arrived without diplomatic letters, without an army, without anyone who spoke his language. And he preached. The Mar Thoma Christians of Kerala, a community of approximately 4 million people today, trace their founding to Thomas's arrival in AD 52. This is not a Western colonial tradition. This community existed before the Portuguese arrived in India in the 16th century. When Portuguese explorers made contact with them in 1515, they found Christians already there, with their own bishops, their own liturgy, their own memory of how it had all begun. The memory they carried was this: a man named Thomas had come. He had performed miracles. He had founded 7 churches. He had died for what he believed. Thomas was martyred in approximately AD 72, near what is now Chennai in southeastern India. The traditional site is a hill called St. Thomas's Mount. When Portuguese archaeologists excavated there in 1523, they found an ancient stone cross with an inscription in Pahlavi script, a form of Persian script used in the early centuries of the Common Era. The inscription predates the Portuguese arrival by at least 1,000 years. The doubter went the furthest. Stay with me, because here is what I want you to feel for a moment. Thomas asked for evidence. He did not pretend to believe something he didn't. He said, "Show me." And when he was shown, he did not hedge. He did not say, "I suppose this is probably true, given the available data." He said, "My Lord and my God." And then he walked to India. Think about what that journey required. Not just the physical endurance, though that alone is staggering. Think about the psychological reality of what Thomas was doing every single day in Kerala. Every morning he woke up in a land that did not know his language, did not share his history, had never heard of the man he was talking about. Every day he chose, again, to keep going. This is the thing about the disciples that I find I cannot set aside, no matter how long I spend with these accounts. They were not in a situation where recanting would have been complicated. Recanting would have been easy. It would have been one sentence. I was wrong. I was a young man following a charismatic teacher, and I convinced myself of something that wasn't real. That sentence would have saved Peter's life in Rome. It would have saved Andrew's life in Patmos. It would have saved Bartholomew's life in Armenia. It would have given Thomas a reason to turn around, get on a boat, and go home. None of them said it. I want you to sit with the specific, human reality of that moment. The moment a person understands that they are about to die for something and has to decide whether to keep saying it. That moment is not abstract. It is not philosophical. It is a body in a room, aware of what is coming, making a choice with everything it has left. 11 men faced that moment, in different rooms, on different continents, across 4 decades, speaking different languages to different executioners in different empires, and every single one of them made the same choice. You do not do that for a story you made up. You do not die for a misunderstanding that has gotten out of hand. You do not walk to India for a vision you later concluded was probably grief-induced hallucination. You do that because you saw something, and you cannot, even with your life on the line, bring yourself to say that you didn't. 3 things. The first, the Greek word marties. The root of our English word martyr originally meant simply witness, a person who testifies to what they have seen. It was a legal term. By the end of the 1st century, the word had acquired a second meaning because of men like these. A martyr became someone who witnessed with their blood, who paid for their testimony with their life. Language changes when events force it to. The disciples did not set out to become martyrs. They set out to be witnesses. The dying was the consequence of the witnessing. And the word kept both meanings because, for these men, you could not have one without the other. The second thing is for you, wherever you are watching this. The historical case for the resurrection does not rest on a feeling. It does not rest on a tradition passed down through institutions that had every reason to preserve it. It rests, at least in part, on this. 11 people who were in the best possible position to know whether what they were claiming was true, who had everything to lose by claiming it and nothing material to gain, went to their deaths refusing to retract it. Historians who study the question of what happened in Jerusalem in the spring of AD 33, including scholars who do not personally believe in the resurrection, acknowledge that the disciples sincerely believed they had seen Jesus alive after his death. That is not a controversial claim among serious historians. What happened next? The fact that they scattered to the ends of the earth and died for it is not the behavior of people who privately knew they had exaggerated or invented a story and had gone too deep to back out. It is the behavior of people who saw something and could not stop saying so. The third thing is the one I keep coming back to. These 11 men, a fisherman, a tax collector, a political radical, a skeptic who demanded proof, changed the course of human civilization. Not through power, not through armies, not through political connections or institutional authority, through testimony. They simply kept saying what they had seen, in chains, on crosses, on a cold volcanic island in the Aegean with nowhere to go. In a country where no one spoke their language, to people who had no framework for what they were hearing. They kept saying it until they couldn't anymore. And in saying it, they gave the world something it has not been able to put down in 2,000 years. Which one of them hit you hardest? Was it Peter on his upside-down cross? Andrew preaching from his for 2 full days? Or Thomas, the doubter, the one who asked for proof, walking alone to India with nothing but the memory of a moment when he looked at a man's wounds and said, "My Lord and my God? Tell me below. I read every comment. And if you found something here today, if this opened a door or gave language to something you already suspected, share it with someone. That is all witness has ever been. One person telling another person what they saw. It was enough to change the world the first time."